A billionaire used her for one night, but then discovered she was a virgin and fell to his knees. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here today. In this video, we're diving into the fascinating intersection of love and ambition. How do you balance your career dreams with the people you love? Can you have both, or do you have to choose? Trust me, this is not your typical love story, so buckle up. It's going to be a fun ride. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to Stories TH for more exciting content like this. And hey, share with us where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. Let's make this a real conversation. All right, relax, get comfy, and let's dive into today's story. It's one you won't want to miss. A shocking beginning. Amelia Carter had always prided herself on being in control. At 30, she had built a name for herself as a brilliant lawyer, fiercely independent, and never one to settle for anything less than excellence. She came from a family that valued power and prestige, but she never let herself be consumed by the glitz of it all. Her life, at least on the surface, was carefully curated, precise, perfect, and neat. And yet, despite all of it, there was always something missing. It wasn't that she didn't have everything anyone could ask for. She had the accolades, the mansion, and even the picture-perfect marriage to William Bennett, the heir to one of the largest real estate empires in the world. But the union wasn't about love. It was a contract, an arrangement made between two families with a shared vision of control and success. Amelia wasn't in it for the romance. Neither was William. They were both brilliant in their own right, but they were strangers to each other in the truest sense. And yet, their lives were woven together by the same invisible thread that bound their families' futures. William Bennett wasn't a man who believed in love. Not really. His life was a series of boardrooms, financial deals, and calculated risks. He had been raised to understand the world through numbers, not emotions. Amelia had been his chosen partner, a woman with the right lineage, the right connections, and the perfect demeanor for a high society marriage. She was everything his parents had dreamed of for him, dignified, composed, and unwavering. They were both the perfect match, but that was all they were, a match, a carefully chosen pair, not two hearts in sync. The day they met had been a formality, a dinner that neither of them had cared much for. The engagement followed the same script, neither one truly feeling any different. It was an arrangement after all. No passion, no deep connection, just a mutual understanding that this was what needed to happen for both families to prosper. Yet, even in their emotionally barren union, there were moments, small, almost invisible moments, that neither of them could explain. They would catch each other's eyes during dinner parties, their glances lingering a fraction of a second too long. It wasn't desire, not in the way most people would understand it, but there was something there, a tension, an awareness, something that neither of them could push away. But they never spoke of it, of course. They didn't need to. Their worlds were separate, his in the glass towers of business, hers in the quiet spaces of law. But one night, everything changed. It began as nothing more than an impulse, a brief, fleeting moment of weakness. Amelia had just wrapped up a long day at the courthouse, her mind spinning with legal jargon and courtroom battles. She hadn't even had the time to think about her marriage, or William, or anything personal. She was too consumed by the weight of her career. When she arrived home that evening, she was already mentally preparing for another late night of paperwork and phone calls. But when she stepped into their penthouse, she found him there. William. He stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the skyline that stretched before them. For a moment, she hesitated. He didn't turn, didn't even acknowledge her presence. She walked past him quietly, peeling off her heels and letting out a sigh of relief as the weight of the day began to dissipate. The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of their unspoken lives. She made her way to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine. She needed it. She had become accustomed to living in a world where appearances mattered more than anything else. The hushed conversations, the rehearsed smiles, the constant pressure to be perfect. All of it had worn her down over time. And yet, there was always a part of her that longed for something more, something real. William didn't speak. He simply watched her from across the room, his gaze following her movements, as if he were studying her. Amelia could feel his eyes on her, and for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her, something she couldn't explain. She took a slow sip of her wine, trying to shake the feeling. What was it? She couldn't place it. She looked at him, and for just a moment, their eyes met. It wasn't the usual polite glance, the one that said, "I see you and I acknowledge you," but something else, something more. He cleared his throat, as if breaking the spell between them. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice cold, detached. It was the first time he had spoken to her like this in weeks. She found herself surprised by the question, and yet it felt oddly familiar, like an old routine they had both long forgotten. "It was fine," she replied, her voice soft. "Just another case to win." "Of course," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. He turned back to the window, and the silence stretched between them again. But this time, it wasn't the comfortable silence they had become used to. It felt different, more charged. It was as if the walls they had so carefully built around each other were beginning to crack. They were still standing, still keeping their distance, but there was something more now, something that neither of them could ignore. They didn't speak much more that night. Amelia finished her wine in silence, and William retreated to his study as he always did. But that night, when she lay in bed, her mind wouldn't quiet. She couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, the way his presence had felt heavier than it had in years. Was it possible that he felt the same strange pull? Was it possible that, despite everything, there was something between them? She didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. The next morning, the routine resumed. William was already gone when she woke up. The house was quiet, as it always was. But as she went through the motions of her day dressing, eating, working, there was a small part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that despite their cold, calculated existence, something had shifted. But Amelia was no fool. She knew that this could all be nothing more than a fleeting moment, a passing thought. After all, they were married, but they were strangers in every sense of the word. Still, as she prepared for another day of legal battles and corporate games, she couldn't help but wonder, what if? The marriage of convenience. Amelia had always known that her marriage to William wasn't built on love. It wasn't even built on respect, at least not in the traditional sense. It was a strategic alliance between two powerful families who had made sure their fates were intertwined long before either of them had any say in the matter. From the very beginning, the contract was clear. No emotions, no mess, just an agreement to live in peace and maintain appearances. But what no one had warned her about was how hollow that peace could feel. They lived in a grand penthouse, surrounded by luxury and excess, yet their hearts remained cold, locked away in separate rooms, both figuratively and literally. Amelia, though successful in her career and well-respected in her field, felt the weight of loneliness every day. William, the stoic CEO, was buried in meetings and financial reports, leaving her to live a life of structured isolation. She had learned early on not to expect warmth from him, nor from anyone in their circle. It was a world of cold transactions, where feelings were seen as a weakness. Their life together followed a rigid routine. She would wake up early, head to the office for long days of intense legal battles, and return home to an empty house, save for the staff that worked tirelessly to keep the mansion spotless. William would be absent for most of the day, lost in his glass tower of spreadsheets and real estate deals. Occasionally, they would meet for dinner, a formal affair, with polite conversation and nothing of substance shared between them. No intimacy, no affection. Just the rituals of a partnership that was as empty as the rooms they walked through. Despite the lack of emotional connection, Amelia kept herself busy. She poured her heart into her work, hoping to fill the void in her life with achievements. She won case after case, gained recognition from her peers, and even became a prominent figure in the legal world. But with every victory, the loneliness crept in further. William, on the other hand, remained just as distant. His business empire was growing, but his heart seemed to shrink with every passing day. And yet, there were moments, small moments, that disturbed the carefully constructed walls they had both built around themselves. Amelia would catch William's eye across a crowded room, and for a split second, there was something there, a flicker of recognition, an unspoken understanding. But those moments were rare and fleeting. The rest of the time, they were nothing more than two strangers in a house too big for both of them. One evening, Amelia returned home from a particularly grueling court session. The weight of the day had worn her down, and all she wanted was to unwind. As she entered the penthouse, she could hear the soft clink of glass, the sound of William pouring himself a drink. He was alone in the living room, seated by the grand fireplace, a rare sight indeed. He looked up as she walked in, his eyes briefly meeting hers before returning to the fire. "Long day?" he asked, his voice a calm, detached monotone. "You could say that," she replied, trying to shake off the exhaustion. She removed her shoes and walked to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. William's gaze followed her movements, but he didn't speak. There was a silence between them that had become all too familiar, and yet tonight it felt heavier. She could feel his eyes on her, and the weight of the moment hit her in a way it never had before. She was so used to the silence, so used to the distance, that she hadn't realized how much she craved something more, a connection, a spark, something that might remind her that she wasn't invisible in this marriage. After a long pause, William finally spoke again, his voice softer this time. "I was thinking about the charity gala next week. We'll need to attend together." Amelia took a sip of her wine, trying to hide the small knot of disappointment in her chest. Another public appearance, another night of smiling for the cameras, pretending everything was perfect, when, in reality, it was anything but. "Of course," she said, her voice even. "I'll make sure my schedule is clear." She didn't expect much from him, she never did. William had never been one for affection or emotional displays. He was the epitome of control, a man who prided himself on his ability to remain distant, detached, and unbothered by the world around him. But Amelia couldn't help but wonder if, somewhere beneath the cold exterior, there was more. She had to wonder, because if there wasn't, then what was the point of this marriage at all? The night passed like any other. They ate dinner, exchanged pleasantries, and went to bed in separate rooms. But Amelia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. Could she continue living like this? Was this really all there was to her life? A cold, emotionless existence, tied to a man who would never truly see her. She had always prided herself on being independent, on being able to navigate this world without needing anyone's approval or love. But now, in the quiet of the night, she wondered if that strength had come at too great a cost. The following days passed in a blur of work, obligations, and empty interactions. But then, the unexpected happened. William returned from a business trip earlier than anticipated, and the news didn't come with a greeting or a casual, "How was your day?" Instead, he walked in with a look on his face that Amelia had never seen before. Frustration, impatience, maybe even a hint of vulnerability. His usually perfect composure was slipping, and for the first time in a long time, Amelia didn't know how to respond. She was in the middle of preparing dinner when he entered the kitchen without knocking, his eyes intense as he spoke. "Amelia, I need to talk to you." She turned, surprised by the urgency in his voice. "What's wrong?" "We need to go to the country house tonight. The storm's coming in fast and the road's about to close. We'll have to stay there until it clears." Amelia nodded, still unsure of the sudden change in tone. "Okay, I'll get my things." The drive to the country house was long and silent, the storm outside raging in sync, with the storm brewing inside her. She couldn't help but wonder, what was happening between them? They had always lived their lives as separate entities, two people bound by circumstance, but now, there was something different in the air, something charged. The country house was small but warm, a stark contrast to the cold sterility of their penthouse. No staff, no formalities, just the two of them, alone in the middle of a storm. The silence between them was palpable, yet somehow it wasn't as uncomfortable as it had been before. It felt different, more alive. The crackling fire in the hearth, the distant rumble of thunder outside, it all seemed to amplify the stillness between them. As the night wore on, the tension that had been building all evening reached its peak. Amelia couldn't stop thinking about the look in William's eyes, the unspoken words that hung heavy in the air. What had changed? Why was this night different from all the others? But before she could find the answer, the storm raged outside, drowning out her thoughts. It was as if the universe had conspired to force them into this moment, this silence, and perhaps into something more. Separate worlds, same space. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a strange quiet. The world outside seemed untouched, bathed in the soft glow of a late autumn sun. Yet, inside the country house, the silence remained, but now it was different. There was a weight to it, a lingering tension that neither Amelia nor William seemed willing to break. Amelia moved through the small kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, her mind still spinning from the night before. William had gone out for a walk to clear his head, but Amelia remained in the house, unsure of what to do next. The house, small and modest compared to their city apartment, felt more real, more alive. There was a sense of intimacy here, one that seemed impossible to cultivate in the cold, pristine spaces of their penthouse. It was here that she realized how much she had missed, how much she had been craving connection, even if she hadn't known it at the time. She wondered if William felt it too, this strange pull between them. If he did, he certainly wasn't showing it. He had become the master of control again, retreating into his familiar shell, keeping his emotions locked away. But there was something in his eyes the night before, something that hinted at a deeper conflict, a vulnerability he couldn't hide, even if he tried. For the first time, Amelia wasn't sure if she could keep pretending, keep living in a world where everything was perfect on the outside, but hollow on the inside. She wasn't sure how long she had been staring out the window, lost in her thoughts. But when she turned around, William was standing in the doorway, his dark suit now replaced with casual clothing, a simple sweater and jeans, more approachable, less imposing. He didn't speak at first, just stood there watching her, his face unreadable. "I've been thinking," he said finally, his voice low, "about last night." Amelia felt her heart skip a beat. She had been expecting him to brush it off, pretend like nothing had happened, but instead, there was a sincerity in his tone that caught her off guard. "Me too," she replied, turning away to pick up her mug, as if the simple action could help her steady herself. "I'm not used to feeling like that," he continued, taking a step forward, his voice hesitant, unsure. "I don't know how to handle it." Amelia set the mug down on the counter, her fingers tightening around the ceramic. "I'm not asking you to know what to do," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "But what I do need is something real, something honest." William's gaze softened, and for a moment there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a longing, perhaps, or regret. But before Amelia could say anything more, he spoke again, his words heavy with something she couldn't quite place. "I've never been good at being honest, not with anyone, not even with myself." His admission hit her harder than she expected. Amelia had always known that William was guarded, a man whose emotions were wrapped tightly in layers of control. But hearing him say it so plainly, so vulnerably, made her realize just how much of himself he had kept hidden. It wasn't just her that had been shut out. It was everyone. He had built walls around himself, and she had been trapped in the shadow of them, unable to reach him. "William," she said, her voice steady now, "what are we doing?" "Because I can't keep living like this. Not anymore. We're strangers, 2 people pretending to be something we're not." There was a long silence between them, one that stretched out in the small kitchen, filling every corner. For a moment, Amelia thought he might walk away, return to his cold, calculated world. But instead, he moved closer, standing beside her at the counter, though he didn't touch her. It was as if he was afraid of breaking whatever fragile connection had been established between them. "I don't want to lose you," he said finally, his words quiet but firm. "But I don't know how to change." Amelia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. "I don't want to lose you either," she whispered, "but I can't keep pretending. I need more than this." William looked at her, his expression unreadable, but there was something softer in his gaze now. "I don't know how to give you more," he admitted. "I don't even know what that means, but I'm willing to try. For you." Amelia didn't know what to say to that. She had always been the one who controlled the situation, who kept everything together, who made the hard decisions. But now, she felt a sense of uncertainty, a realization that maybe she couldn't fix everything on her own. Maybe they both needed to let go of their carefully constructed facades and face what was underneath. "We'll figure it out," she said finally, her voice low but determined. "But we have to start being honest with each other. No more games, no more pretending." William nodded, his jaw tightening slightly, but there was something in his posture that seemed different, less rigid, less distant. "I can do that," he said. "I'll try." And with that, they stood in silence for a while, letting the weight of their words settle in the space between them. It wasn't a promise, not yet, but it was a step, and for the first time in a long while, Amelia felt like maybe, just maybe, they were moving in the right direction. The rest of the day passed in a quiet, awkward sort of calm. They didn't speak much after their conversation, but there was a shift between them, a subtle change in the way they interacted. They moved through the house with a new awareness of each other, but still at a distance. It wasn't the grand, emotional breakthrough she had hoped for, but it was a start. By the time the evening came, the storm had cleared completely, leaving the sky dark and clear. Amelia and William sat together on the porch of the country house, the night air cool and crisp, their breaths visible in the light of the moon. They didn't speak at first, but the silence felt different this time. It was no longer oppressive or cold. Instead, it felt like a shared understanding, an unspoken agreement to try again. Amelia didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a small flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something, and sometimes that's all it takes. A strange quiet. The days that followed were marked by a quiet that neither of them had expected. Amelia and William moved through their daily routines with a new understanding, a tentative truce between them. They didn't speak of the night at the country house, didn't mention the kiss that had almost shifted everything between them. Instead, they simply existed, coexisting in a way that was strangely peaceful. There was no immediate change, no grand gestures of affection, just two people learning how to exist in each other's presence without the usual walls. Amelia had returned to her work with a renewed focus. She was determined to remain in control, to stay grounded in the only part of her life that hadn't been tainted by uncertainty. Her legal career had always been her anchor, the one thing she could rely on when everything else felt out of reach. But even as she threw herself into her cases, there was something pulling at her heart, a subtle reminder that things were not as they seemed. She could ignore it, could pretend it wasn't there, but she knew deep down that this new dynamic with William was starting to shift her in ways she couldn't predict. William, too, seemed different. He was still the same man, calculating, meticulous, driven by his need for control. But there were small changes in him, subtle shifts in his behavior that didn't go unnoticed. He began to linger in the mornings, sitting at the breakfast table with her. His usually intense focus on business softened, almost as if he were trying to ease into a new way of being. He didn't ask her how her day went, but there was a quiet curiosity in the way he looked at her, a sense that he was waiting for her to make the next move, to give him permission to step closer. The tension that had once defined their relationship began to ebb, replaced by a new kind of silence. This silence wasn't oppressive or cold. It was soft, filled with unspoken understanding. They didn't need to talk about their feelings, they simply lived, side by side. The walls between them weren't gone, but they were lower now, more fragile. Amelia had never expected to feel this way about William, but here she was, trying to navigate the uncertain waters between them. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for, whether it was for him to finally let his guard down or for herself to find the courage to ask for more. All she knew was that she couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed. That evening, as Amelia finished up a long day at the office, she returned home to find William sitting in the living room, reading a book. She hadn't seen him in the space much before, and it took her by surprise. He usually spent his time in his office, hidden behind walls of paper and numbers. But now, here he was, in their shared space, choosing to occupy it instead of retreating into his familiar isolation. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. The tension wasn't gone, but it was muted, more manageable. Amelia could feel the quiet energy between them, the unsaid words, the questions left lingering in the air. Hadn't expected him to open up, to be here, present in a way that didn't feel forced. She hadn't known how badly she needed this simple presence, until it was right in front of her. "What are you reading?" she asked, her voice quiet but genuine. William looked up from the book, his lips curving into a small smile, the first genuine smile she'd seen in days. "Something for work," he said, though it didn't sound like the usual corporate jargon. "Thought I'd take a break from the usual." Amelia nodded, still standing in the doorway. For a moment, she considered leaving, retreating to her own space. But something stopped her. She couldn't put her finger on it. Maybe it was the look in his eyes, or the way he wasn't pulling away, or perhaps it was just the realization that this quiet, unspoken connection between them was slowly becoming something more than just two people living in the same house. She stepped into the room, sitting on the couch across from him. "I'm glad you're here," she said softly, surprising herself with the words. She hadn't realized how much she meant them until she spoke them aloud. He set the book down, his expression softening. "I know I haven't been around much," he said, his voice low, as if admitting a long-held truth. "I've been avoiding things, but I don't want to keep doing that. I don't want to live like this anymore." The vulnerability in his voice was disarming. For the first time in a long time, William wasn't hiding behind his walls. He wasn't the calculated, distant CEO who only cared about deals and profits. He was just a man, sitting across from her, admitting that he too had been afraid. Afraid of what this marriage could be if they actually allowed it to be something real. Amelia's heart thudded in her chest, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her gaze meeting his. "What do you want, William?" The question hung in the air, simple but loaded with meaning. William exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I want to be here, with you, for real. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm willing to figure it out." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them was no longer heavy with doubt. It was full of possibility. Amelia wasn't sure what this meant, wasn't sure where it would lead, but she could feel something shifting, something breaking open inside her. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words until now. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that William was willing to try, to really try. She smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but it felt real, like the first genuine expression of emotion between them in a long time. "I think we've both been avoiding things," she said softly. "But maybe we don't need to anymore." William nodded, his eyes holding hers. "Maybe we don't." The night unfolded in silence, but this time, it wasn't the emptiness of before. It was a silence filled with unspoken understanding, a silence that spoke volumes. They didn't need to say more. For the first time in a long time, they simply shared the space, no need for words, no need for grand gestures, just the quiet presence of two people who had finally started to break down the walls between them. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairy tale she had imagined when she was younger, the kind of love that arrived with fireworks and passion. But it was real, and sometimes that was all that mattered. And as Amelia sat there, watching the man she had once seen as nothing more than a business partner, she couldn't help but wonder if maybe this was the beginning of something entirely new. The unlikely storm. The weeks that followed were filled with small changes, little moments that seemed insignificant on the surface, but slowly began to weave a new fabric between them. It was as though William and Amelia had opened a door to something neither of them had ever truly experienced before, a space where vulnerability and honesty were not weaknesses, but pathways to connection. But life, as it often does, had other plans. One crisp evening, as Amelia returned from a long day at the office, she could sense that something was different. It wasn't just the usual exhaustion weighing on her. It was something else, something in the air that made her pause when she stepped through the door. William was already there, his briefcase discarded on the entryway table, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't buried in paperwork. Instead, he stood by the window, looking out at the storm brewing on the horizon. "William?" Amelia called out, her voice laced with curiosity. He turned, his face unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something dark, something unsettling. "We need to talk." Amelia's heart skipped. She had gotten used to their quiet routine, the slow, steady growth of their relationship, and the last thing she expected was for him to drop a bombshell. "About what?" she asked, setting her keys down. I've been thinking," he said, his voice faltering slightly. "About us, about everything." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, stepping closer. "I think we're both pretending," William admitted, his gaze dropping to the floor as if ashamed of his own words. "We're pretending to have it all figured out, pretending that this is enough. But it isn't, Amelia." Her heart tightened in her chest. This wasn't what she had expected, not at all. He had been so present, so open in recent weeks, and now this? "You're right," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions swirling inside her. "It's not enough. We're just floating. I don't know how we got here, but we're not where we need to be." William's eyes met hers, full of something she couldn't quite place. Desperation, regret, fear. She couldn't tell. "I thought I could handle this, but I can't. I'm scared, Amelia. I'm scared that I'm losing you, even though I don't know how to keep you." The confession hung in the air, heavy with all the things he had never said before. Amelia didn't know what to say in response. She had spent so many years building walls around her emotions, pretending that everything was fine, that she hadn't expected William to feel the same way. But here he was, a man who prided himself on control, admitting that he was terrified of losing her. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, her words wrapped in truth. "But I need more than just words, William. We both do. This," she motioned between them. "This can't be some halfway thing. Either we're all in or we're not." He nodded slowly, as though absorbing the weight of her words. There was no rush to fix it all, no promises of change in a heartbeat. But there was something real, something that hadn't been there before, the desire to try, to be better, together. As they stood there, the storm outside seemed to intensify, the wind howling against the windows as if echoing the turmoil within. Amelia felt the familiar tension in her chest, the sense that things were about to shift, but this time she didn't pull away. This time she stood firm, ready to face whatever came next. Later that night, after they had both retreated to their separate spaces, the storm continued its assault on the city. The windows rattled with the wind, but inside there was a different kind of storm brewing, one that neither of them could avoid anymore. They had opened a door to something raw, something powerful, and now they would have to face it together. Amelia lay in bed, her mind racing. She thought about William's words, about the vulnerability in his voice, the fear that had seeped into his soul. She had never seen him like that. He was a man who had always maintained control, who had built an empire from the ground up. And yet, here he was, admitting that he couldn't control, this couldn't control her. For the first time, Amelia wasn't sure if she could control it either. She wasn't sure if she could keep playing the role she had been assigned in this strange marriage, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time to let go of control and allow herself to feel, to trust, to believe that she wasn't alone in this. The next morning, they met at the breakfast table in silence, the air between them heavy, but not uncomfortable. There was no need to speak. They both understood the unspoken agreement that had been made the night before. They would try. They would face whatever was coming together. And then, as the day went on, something shifted. It wasn't immediate or dramatic, but the small gestures started again. William brought her coffee without asking. He asked about her day in a way that felt more genuine than it had in years. And when he left the house, he kissed her on the cheek. Just a small, fleeting touch, but it was enough to make her pause, to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real. But as the day wore on, things began to take another unexpected turn. The quiet between them began to break, like a dam slowly cracking under pressure. There were conversations small, inconsequential at first, but gradually they delved deeper into uncharted territory. They spoke of their childhoods, of their dreams, of the things they had never shared. And in those moments, Amelia could feel the weight of the walls they had both built, crumbling little by little. That night, as they sat in front of the fire, Amelia found herself looking at William differently. He wasn't just the man she had married out of obligation. He wasn't just the cold CEO of a massive corporation. He was a man who had allowed himself to be vulnerable, to admit his mistakes, and to ask for help. For the first time, Amelia saw him as someone who was capable of change, and maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to change too. But even as they sat in the warmth of the firelight, Amelia knew that the storm wasn't over. They had come a long way, but there was still so much to face, so much to navigate. The winds outside howled louder, and Amelia could feel the storm inside her stir once again. It wasn't just the external weather that was changing. It was them, both of them. And though she didn't know where it would all lead, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A touch that changed everything. The following days carried a quiet but undeniable shift. Amelia and William had finally begun to bridge the gap that had existed between them for so long. It wasn't a grand gesture or an all-encompassing change, but it was progress. They were more present for each other, listening more intently, and, more importantly, letting their guard down, piece by piece. Amelia couldn't deny the strange pull she felt when she saw him again. She had lived alongside him for months, no, years yet now. With each passing day, it felt like she was rediscovering him. It was as if the layers of indifference that had once cloaked him had finally started to fall away. And with every layer that fell, she saw a different side of him, one that was more vulnerable, more real, and more human than she had ever known. One evening, after a long day of legal meetings, Amelia came home, expecting nothing more than the usual quiet night. William had just returned from a business trip, and to her surprise, was in the living room when she walked in. He had his shoes off, sleeves rolled up, and was sitting on the couch, staring at a small stack of papers. For a man like him, this was unusual. The space between them had always been filled with formality, but tonight, everything felt different. "Home early?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe, unsure of what to make of the sight before her. He looked up, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I thought I'd take a break from the office today. I needed to clear my head." Amelia nodded, walking over and sitting beside him. Their usual distance was gone, replaced by something more comfortable, though still somewhat unfamiliar. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. He sighed, glancing at the papers in his hands. "Everything. This marriage, my work. I've been thinking about how much of it is just routine. I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore." Amelia turned to face him, noticing the subtle change in his demeanor. The once imposing man who had always been in control was now looking at her as if he too didn't have all the answers. "William, you don't have to have it all figured out," she said softly. "We're both just trying to make this work." There was a brief pause as he considered her words, and then, without another word, he placed the papers down and turned to face her. For a moment, they simply sat there, looking at each other. The tension between them, the silence that had once been so thick, now seemed to fade into something more gentle. Then, without warning, William reached out and took her hand. His touch was light at first, tentative, as if he was unsure whether it was even allowed. But Amelia didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingers intertwine with his, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but in that moment, it meant everything. It was the first time, since their marriage had started, that they had truly touched not out of obligation, but out of something else, something deeper, something unspoken. "I don't know what this is between us yet," he whispered, his voice steady but filled with an emotion she hadn't heard before. "But I know it's real. I'm not running from it anymore." Amelia's heart raced as his words settled over her. She had been waiting for this, for him to finally admit that he was willing to step into the unknown with her, to face the messy, complicated reality of their relationship. But it wasn't just his admission that struck her. It was the way he had touched her. That single, simple touch felt like it was healing something inside her that she hadn't realized was broken. They sat there in silence for a while longer, the world outside their window fading into the background. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't all fixed, But for the first time, Amelia felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Neither of them was. They were finally facing the unknown together. Later that evening, they sat down for dinner, but the usual formalities had melted away. The conversation flowed easily, with William asking her about her day, genuinely listening to her responses. Amelia found herself laughing at his dry sense of humor, something she hadn't realized she missed. It felt like a breath of fresh air, this simple human connection that had been missing from their lives for so long. After dinner, they lingered in the living room, enjoying the warmth of the fire crackling in the fireplace. Amelia leaned back against the couch, her body relaxing into the cushions, while William sat beside her, his arms stretched across the back of the couch. For a moment, they were just two people, no titles, no responsibilities, simply being present with each other. And it was enough. "Remember the first night we spent here?" William asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Amelia smiled, the memory of their first night at the country house rushing back to her. The storm, the unexpected intimacy between them. "How could I forget?" she said with a soft laugh. "It feels like a lifetime ago." "I think we've both changed since then," William said, his gaze thoughtful. "And maybe that's a good thing." Amelia nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of her wine glass. "Maybe it is," she agreed quietly. "But I think the real change has been in us. We're finally letting go of the things that held us back. Maybe it's time we really start living this." William's eyes softened as he looked at her, and for a brief moment, the world outside ceased to matter. All that was left was the quiet connection between them. He had been right. They had both been pretending, living lives they thought were supposed to work, but now they were finding something far more real, something that didn't require perfection, only presence. The night stretched on, and as the hours passed, something shifted between them. They were no longer two people trapped in a loveless marriage. They were two people discovering each other for the first time. It wasn't romantic in the way movies portrayed love, with grand gestures and impossible declarations. It was quieter, subtler, but no less significant. When Amelia finally stood to leave for the night, she hesitated, glancing back at William. The distance between them was still there, but it had shrunk to something manageable, something she could work with. "Good night," she said softly, her voice warm, her gaze lingering. "Good night," William replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I'll see you in the morning." And for the first time in a long while, Amelia went to bed with a sense of calm. The storm had passed, both outside and in her heart. The world wasn't perfect, and neither was their relationship. But they were learning, slowly but surely, to trust each other, to touch, to feel, to be honest. And that was enough for now. The morning after. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of their penthouse, casting soft shadows on the marble floors. Amelia woke up feeling different, but not in the way she had expected. There was no knot of dread in her chest, no weight pressing down on her thoughts. Instead, she felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet understanding that the night had been a turning point for both of them. She stretched and sat up in bed, glancing over at the empty side where William had once lain. His absence didn't sting the way it had before. There was no emptiness in the room, no coldness between them. He was there, but in a way he had always been, just a little out of reach, behind walls of his own making. Yet she could sense the change, the same change he had admitted to last night. The walls were coming down, slowly but surely. When she got up to start her morning routine, the familiar silence of their shared apartment didn't feel as oppressive as it had in the past. Instead, it felt like a blank canvas, ready for them to fill it together, one small moment at a time. She made coffee and glanced through the window, watching the city wake up beneath the pale sky. A fresh day, a fresh start, and for the first time, the idea of their future together didn't seem impossible. As she sipped her coffee, Amelia's phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up and saw a message from William. "Good morning. Hope your day's off to a good start." The simplicity of his message caught her off guard. It wasn't grandiose, nor was it the calculated formal tone she had once come to expect. It was just real. She couldn't remember the last time he had sent her such a casual, warm message. She smiled softly to herself before replying, "Good morning to you too. Let's make today count." It was small, this shift in their communication, but it was a step forward. She set the phone down, her heart lighter than it had been in days. The day unfolded with its usual hustle calls to return, meetings to attend, but there was something different about it all. At work, Amelia found herself thinking more about William than she expected. Their conversation from the night before played in her mind, the way he had opened up to her, the vulnerability that had left both of them raw, but somehow more connected. She had always valued her independence, but now she could see that it wasn't just about standing on her own anymore. It was about standing together. Her colleagues noticed the change too. Her assistant, Karen, gave her an inquisitive look when she walked into the office. "You're different today, Amelia. What's going on? You look—" Karen paused, searching for the right words. "Happy. More present." Amelia chuckled softly, running a hand through her hair. "I guess I'm just adjusting to some things. Personal things. But thank you for noticing." It felt strange, having someone recognize that shift in her, but also liberating. For so long, she had kept her emotional world sealed away, tucked behind the walls of her professional demeanor. But now, she was beginning to let people in. Not just William, but everyone. Later that afternoon, she received another message from him. "Do you want to meet up for dinner tonight? I know a place that's quiet. We could talk more." The invitation felt different too. There was no formality in it, no expectation, just a simple suggestion to spend time together, to continue the conversations they had started. Amelia knew she wanted to. She needed to know more about this man who had once been a stranger, who now felt like someone she could trust. "I'd like that. Let's make it happen." That evening, as she stepped into the restaurant, she saw him waiting for her. William was dressed casually, dark jeans and a button-up shirt, but there was something in the way he sat there, relaxed but alert, that made Amelia's heart flutter. He was still the man she had married, but he was changing, and so was she. He stood when she approached, offering her a warm smile. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice sincere, with none of the formality it usually carried. Amelia felt her pulse quicken at the compliment. "Thank you," she said softly, taking the seat across from him. The waiter brought their drinks, and they both fell into a comfortable silence, the noise of the restaurant buzzing around them. "So," William said after a moment, "how's everything going with your cases?" Amelia smiled, pleased by the way he seemed genuinely interested. "Busy as always, but manageable. I think I've finally got a handle on things. And you?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "How's work?" "It's the same," William said, his tone light, but there was a glimmer of something deeper in his eyes. "But I've been thinking about us." Amelia's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't look away. She had spent so much time pushing him away, hiding behind walls of professionalism and emotional distance. But now, as they sat there, facing each other, there was no need for walls. There was only honesty. "What about us?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. William took a breath, his fingers tapping lightly on his glass. "I've been thinking about how we've been living for the last few years, how we've been so disconnected. But last night, after we talked, I realized something. I don't want that anymore. I want to try. I want to actually be here, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, for you, for us." His words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered, and for the first time in a long while, Amelia didn't feel like she had to be the strong one. She didn't have to carry the weight of their relationship alone. "I want that too," she said, her voice soft, but resolute. "I've been scared too, William, scared of what this means, of what it could mean for us. But I don't want to run anymore. I'm ready to try, to really try." There was a moment of silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke of understanding, of shared feelings, of two people standing on the edge of something new, something uncertain but promising. William reached across the table, his hand brushing against hers. This time there was no hesitation, no pulling back. just the simple act of reaching out, of connecting in a way they hadn't done in years. "I'm glad you're here," he said quietly. "I'm glad I'm here too," Amelia whispered, her heart swelling with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. The rest of the dinner passed in a gentle, easy flow of conversation. They didn't try to force anything. They just talked about their day, their dreams, their fears. It was all so simple, yet so significant. They weren't pretending anymore. They weren't living in a facade. They were being real, and for the first time, it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. As they left the restaurant and stepped into the cool night air, Amelia felt lighter than she had in years. The city around them buzzed with energy, but it no longer felt overwhelming. She felt a quiet certainty in her heart. This was real. This wasn't some fleeting moment, some false hope. They were building something together, piece by piece, one honest conversation at a time. She glanced over at William, his face illuminated by the streetlights, and smiled. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and that was enough. The morning after. The days after that dinner were filled with a quiet, almost tangible shift. It wasn't the grand gestures or the sweeping confessions that changed things. It was the subtle, everyday moments that began to build a new foundation between William and Amelia. The morning after their dinner, Amelia woke up feeling different. There was no lingering heaviness in her chest, no uncertainty clouding her thoughts. The uncertainty had been replaced with something new, a feeling of calm, of possibility. She took a deep breath as she stretched, her eyes catching the soft light filtering through the curtains. The world outside was waking up, but inside her heart, there was an unfamiliar peace. She glanced over at the other side of the bed. William wasn't there, but the absence didn't hurt like it once did. It didn't sting with the same bitterness, because now she knew, deep down, that things were changing. He was trying. She was trying. And that, for the first time in a long while, was enough. As she made her way to the kitchen, she heard the soft sound of a coffee maker buzzing in the background. William was already awake, already starting his day. He was in the kitchen, his back to her, brewing coffee, just like the ordinary morning they had never shared before. She didn't know why this felt so different. Perhaps it was the simplicity of it all, or perhaps it was the fact that they were finally in sync. "Morning," she said, her voice soft but warm, and she didn't try to hide the smile that tugged at the corners of her lips. William turned, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't looking at her with the cold, distant gaze that had once been his trademark. He was looking at her as if she mattered, as if they mattered. "Good morning," he replied, his voice still groggy from sleep but filled with a genuine warmth. "Coffee?" Amelia nodded, stepping closer to the counter. "Yes, please." They stood side by side as he poured the hot coffee into 2 mugs. There was no need for words, just the quiet, peaceful rhythm of 2 people who had learned to share the space. It wasn't perfect. There was still much left unsaid, but it was real. It felt like they were both doing the hard work of creating something they hadn't been able to before. As they sat down at the kitchen table, the conversation flowed easily. It was simple, easy about their plans for the day, about the weather, and even a light joke about the previous night's dinner. For the first time, Amelia didn't feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She didn't feel like she had to carry all the emotional labor of their relationship alone. William was there, really there, in a way he hadn't been before, and that made all the difference. The following week brought more change, subtle yet profound. William started making small gestures that, though insignificant on the surface, spoke volumes. He left little notes for Amelia, tucked into places she would find them inside her briefcase, on her desk, by the bathroom mirror. Simple things, words like, "Good luck today," or "You're doing great." The notes weren't grand declarations, but they were enough to remind her that he was there. He was seeing her. The small touches, the little acknowledgments, all served as quiet proof of his commitment. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding behind walls of control. He was trying more than he ever had. And for Amelia, that was all she had ever wanted. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and client calls, Amelia returned home to find the apartment quiet, but not empty. She dropped her briefcase by the door and walked into the living room, where William was sitting on the couch, flipping through a book. She had expected him to be buried in work, but instead, he was reading a simple act that caught her by surprise. "Didn't expect you to be home so early," she said, standing in the doorway. He looked up, his eyes warm. "I thought we could have dinner together. You've been working late all week. Thought you might want to relax for a bit." The thoughtfulness in his words made her pause. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed this, how much she had been craving the kind of attention he was giving her now. "Thank you," she said softly, stepping further into the room. "I'd love that." That night, they ate dinner together in the small dining nook of their apartment, the conversation easy and light. They spoke of nothing particularly important, but there was an intimacy in their exchange, a feeling of connection that neither of them had been able to access before. Amelia had spent so much time building walls, keeping her emotions locked up, afraid of being vulnerable. But now, with each passing day, she was learning to tear down those walls, one brick at a time. And William, though he had always been the one to retreat into control, was finally stepping into the space she had longed for right alongside her. After dinner, they spent the evening talking about their dreams, both personal and professional. Amelia had never truly shared these ambitions with anyone before. They had always been her private hopes, tucked away in the corners of her mind. But now, as she spoke to William, she realized how much she had been holding back. "I've always wanted to run my own firm," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "To build something from the ground up, to be in control of my own future." William listened intently, his eyes focused on her. "I think you could do it," he said, his voice low but confident. "You're one of the smartest people I know, and you're driven. You've already built something amazing with your career. Why not take the next step?" Amelia felt her chest tighten at his words. For so long, she had kept these dreams hidden, buried beneath the weight of their marriage and the constant push to prove herself. But now, with William's encouragement, she felt a spark ignite inside her, a spark of confidence she hadn't felt in years. "Maybe I will," she said, smiling softly at him. The next few weeks were filled with quiet progress. William continued to show up, really show up, in ways that had once felt unimaginable. He didn't just throw money or solutions at problems, he listened. He offered his support, but never tried to control the outcome. For the first time, Amelia felt like she wasn't walking this path alone. One night, after returning from a late dinner meeting, she found William sitting at the kitchen table, a look of concentration on his face. He had paper spread out in front of him, but there was something about the way he sat, his posture, the way his eyes were focused, that told her this wasn't about business. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice soft as she approached him. William looked up, his eyes tired, but filled with an emotion that she hadn't seen in a long time. "No," he said quietly. "I've been thinking about what we talked about the future, and I think I'm finally ready to start living it. Not just the life I thought I was supposed to live, but the life I want." Amelia felt her heart skip. "What do you mean?" He smiled, a slow, almost hesitant smile, as though he was still figuring it all out. "I mean, I'm ready to let go of all the things I thought were important. I'm ready to build something real with you." And in that moment, Amelia knew that this was it, the turning point they had both been waiting for. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be perfect, but they were finally moving forward together. Not as two people trapped by their circumstances, but as two people choosing each other, day by day, step by step. "I'm ready too," she whispered, and for the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so uncertain. Part 9. The first step toward real change. The weeks that followed felt like a gradual, quiet unfolding. William and Amelia didn't try to force the change, didn't rush toward an idealized future they thought they should have. They didn't need to. The simple act of being present for one another had begun to fill the spaces between them, those empty, cold spaces that had once defined their marriage. Amelia spent most of her time at work, pushing through the demanding cases she was known for, but there was something different now. The pressure didn't feel as heavy, and the loneliness that had clung to her for so long no longer whispered in the corners of her mind. She was starting to trust again, not just in herself, but in the possibility that things could be better. Things could change, and William, too, was changing. He had begun showing up for her in ways that were more than just physical presence. It was in the small, thoughtful gestures, like leaving a cup of tea by her desk when she had an early morning meeting, or texting her in the middle of the day to simply ask how things were going. These weren't grand gestures, they didn't need to be, but they meant something real. They meant he was finally letting her in. The evening after a particularly long day at the office, Amelia arrived home to find the penthouse quieter than usual. She had expected William to be buried in paperwork, his face buried behind the walls he had once hidden behind. But instead, he was sitting in the living room, a look of calm on his face as he skimmed through a book. "Hey," she greeted him softly, dropping her bag by the door. "Hey," he responded, looking up with a soft smile. "How was your day?" "Exhausting," she replied, sitting down next to him. "But good. Lots of cases wrapped up. It feels like I'm finally getting the hang of things." She paused, watching him. "How about you?" William closed the book, his fingers resting lightly on the cover. "I've been thinking," he said, his tone quiet but serious, "about us." Amelia looked at him, the soft sound of the city outside their window filling the silence. "I've been thinking about that too," she said, her voice steady but filled with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. I think I'm finally ready to do this," William said, his voice more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. "To really be here with you, not just in the same space, but in the same life. I've spent so long building walls around myself, around this marriage, and it's time I started tearing them down." Her heart skipped at his words. The admission was simple, but it carried so much weight. He wasn't just talking about the present, about today, but about the future, the one they would create together. "I'm ready too," Amelia whispered, feeling a tear she hadn't expected form in her eye. "But it's not going to be easy, William. It's going to take time." "I know," he said, nodding, "but I want to try. I've never wanted to try for anything this much before." And for the first time, Amelia believed him. The words felt different coming from him now. They weren't promises made to appease, to keep her quiet. They were real. That evening, after dinner, they sat together on the couch, no longer pretending that the silence between them didn't exist. It wasn't the kind of silence that they had endured for years, heavy and suffocating. This was different. It was the quiet of understanding, of two people who knew they had a long road ahead, but who were ready to take that first step together. "I've been thinking about what I want," Amelia said, her voice hesitant but gaining strength. "And for the first time in a long time, I think I know." William looked at her, his gaze steady. "What is it?" "I want to build something real, something with you. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I want to try. I want us to try. I'm not sure how we're going to get there, but I don't want to walk this path alone anymore." He reached out, his hand brushing hers, a simple gesture that felt more significant than any grand gesture could ever be. "I don't want you to walk it alone either," he said softly. "And I don't want to keep pretending that we're not in this together. We're not just two people living parallel lives anymore. We're partners in this, and that means I'm with you, no matter what." Amelia took a deep breath, her heart swelling with emotion. She didn't need him to promise her the moon. She didn't need extravagant declarations. All she needed was his willingness to be there, to try to show up every day, just like he was now. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice small but strong. "But I think I'm ready to be scared with you." "I think that's the only way to do it," William replied, his voice full of quiet conviction. "Together." The world outside felt distant, a blur of lights and noise. But in that moment, all that mattered was the space between them, the unspoken agreement that had been made, the trust that was starting to form. In the days that followed, Amelia and William took small steps to rebuild their connection, their trust. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't instantaneous, but it was real. They spoke more openly, shared more about their hopes, their fears, and their dreams. They began to show up for each other in the simplest of ways, a touch on the arm, a thoughtful gesture, a look that spoke volumes without saying a word. These small moments began to weave the fabric of something new, One weekend, they spent the afternoon together, walking through the park. There was no agenda, no business meetings or court cases to tend to. Just two people, side by side, in the quiet of the afternoon, learning what it meant to be there for each other. As they strolled through the park, Amelia couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come in such a short time. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it felt like they were finally on the same path, together. When they reached a small bench, William stopped and sat down, pulling her beside him. The air was cool, the sky a deep shade of orange as the sun began to set. It was simple, peaceful, and yet it felt like a moment of significance. "Thank you," Amelia said, her voice soft but filled with meaning. "For being here, for being real." William smiled, squeezing her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in a long time, Amelia believed him. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it, not alone, but with him by her side. Part 10. The Quiet Before the Storm. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. William and Amelia's tentative peace began to take root, growing stronger with each passing day. They weren't perfect, and their connection wasn't a grand, cinematic love story. It was something far more real. Every day, they learned how to navigate this new version of themselves, together. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. They still had their rough patches, moments of doubt, times when Amelia would pull away, overwhelmed by the weight of their history. And William, despite his growing openness, still found it difficult to let go of his need for control. But those moments grew shorter, less frequent. They had learned how to navigate the silence and the tension with honesty and patience. And then, just when it seemed like they were starting to truly find their rhythm, a new challenge emerged, one that neither of them had anticipated. It was an ordinary Tuesday, and Amelia was heading out of the office when she received a call from William. Her stomach tightened in anticipation. She had been feeling a little more distant from him lately. There had been a few days of awkward silence, a brief return to the distance they had once known so well, but she had chalked it up to the normal ebb and flow of life. Now, she wondered if there was something more. "Amelia," William said, his voice tight, filled with something she couldn't quite place. "We need to talk about something important." Her heart skipped, and she felt an unfamiliar sense of dread settle into her chest. "Okay, I'm coming home. What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her tone steady. "Just get here as soon as you can," he replied. The words clipped, and the line went silent before she could respond. The feeling that had been lurking in her chest all day now bloomed into a full sense of unease. She didn't know what had changed, but something had shifted, and she could feel it in the air. She couldn't shake the worry that this was going to be one of those moments, the ones where they had to confront something they weren't ready for. When she arrived at their penthouse, she found William sitting in the living room, his face grim, his hands tightly clasped together. He was staring at the floor, the weight of something heavy pulling down his usually composed demeanor. "William," she said softly, walking toward him, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "What is it? What's going on?" He looked up at her, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before, regret, fear, and a deep sadness. "Amelia, I've been offered a deal, a huge one, a chance to expand the business overseas, to take it to a global scale. It could change everything, for both of us." Her heart dropped. William had always been driven by ambition, but this was different. They had made so much progress, so many quiet but powerful strides toward a life together. And now, it felt like that fragile peace was being threatened by something bigger than either of them. "Isn't that what you've always wanted?" she asked, her voice low, betraying a hint of disappointment she hadn't meant to show. "It is," he replied, his voice cracking slightly. "But not at this cost. Amelia, the catch is, it would mean I'd have to move to another country. And it's not just a business move. It's a life change, one that would leave us separated. It's what I've always dreamed of, but what?" Amelia asked, her heart aching at the sight of him struggling. "I don't know if I can keep this us if I take that step. I don't know if we're ready for something like that," he confessed. "And I don't know if you'd want me to do it." Amelia stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. The thought of him leaving, of them being pulled apart just when they had started to build something real, was too much to bear. Yet, at the same time, she couldn't deny that she understood his ambition. She had built a career for herself, a future that was hers alone. And now, it seemed, they were both standing at the crossroads of their personal and professional lives. But did that mean they had to choose between the two? "I can't make that decision for you," Amelia said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can let you go. I've been fighting to have you here, to have us here, to make it work. And now, you're telling me that the thing you've always wanted might pull us apart." She swallowed hard, feeling the lump in her throat. The possibility of being without him, of losing everything they had just begun to rebuild, was too much to fathom. But she couldn't stop the words from tumbling out. "You have to decide, William. You have to choose what you want more. And if you choose to go, I'll have to let you go too." For a long moment, there was silence. Neither of them knew what to say. The room felt impossibly heavy, the weight of the decision pressing on both of them. William's eyes searched hers, as if looking for the right words, for a way out, for reassurance that whatever path he chose, they would still have each other. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but firm. "I don't want to lose us, not after everything we've been through, but I also can't let this opportunity slip away. I'm torn, Amelia. I don't know what to do." Amelia felt the tears sting her eyes, but she fought them back. This wasn't about emotion. It was about their future, about the choice that lay before them. "Then take some time," she said quietly. "Think about it. And then, when you're ready, we'll figure it out." She didn't know if she was prepared for this moment. She didn't know if she was prepared to face the possibility that their hard-won progress could come crashing down in an instant. But she did know one thing. They couldn't keep living in limbo. Whatever decision William made, it had to be made with honesty, with clarity. As she stood there, watching him struggle with his decision, she realized that no matter what happened, she was going to be okay. She had learned to trust herself again. She had learned that she could live without the constant weight of fear or isolation hanging over her. She had learned, too, that she deserved someone who was willing to meet her halfway. And if William wasn't that person, then maybe it was time to let go. "Take the time you need," she said again, her voice steadier now, her heart resolute. "But when you come back, we'll need to have a real conversation about everything." William nodded, and she saw the tears in his eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. This wasn't easy for him. It wasn't easy for either of them. But in that moment, she knew that whatever the outcome, they would both find a way to navigate it, together or apart. The storm had come, but they had yet to see how it would pass. The decision that changed everything. The following days felt like an endless series of moments, each filled with tension, uncertainty, and the weight of decisions yet to be made. Amelia kept herself busy with work, diving into her cases with a renewed focus, but her mind often wandered back to William. He had seemed so lost in his own thoughts, so consumed by the decision that loomed over them both. And no matter how much she tried to distance herself from it, the thought of losing him, of everything they had built together, gnawed at her constantly. William hadn't said much in the days since that conversation. He had retreated into his work, as he often did when faced with a difficult decision. He had stopped sending her those little notes, those small gestures that had once felt like a lifeline. And though she knew he was still processing, it left her feeling distant, alone, and unsure of what would happen next. Every time they crossed paths in the apartment, there was a certain hesitance in the air. Neither of them knew how to act, how to bridge the gap that had opened up between them. The comfortable silence that had once existed between them now felt suffocating, as though every word, every glance, carried the weight of an unspoken question. What's next? Where do we go from here? It wasn't until that Friday afternoon, when she arrived home later than usual, that Amelia got the answer she had been waiting for. She opened the door to their penthouse and immediately noticed the difference. The lights were dimmed, and the sound of soft jazz filled the air, William's favorite music. He was sitting on the couch, looking more relaxed than he had in days, a glass of wine in his hand. "Hey," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I've been thinking a lot." Amelia stood still in the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. About what? He gestured to the space between them, the room that had once been filled with so much tension. About us, about everything, and I've realized something. She walked over, sitting down beside him. Her pulse quickened as she waited for him to continue. For days, she had wondered if he would go through with the move, whether he would choose his career over their relationship. But now, sitting next to him, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever decision he had made, it was the one that would define their future. I've decided to turn the offer down, he said, his voice steady. I can't go. Not like this. Not when I'm still figuring out what this... He paused, looking at her with a mixture of vulnerability and determination. What we are really means. Amelia felt a rush of emotions flood through her: relief, confusion, and, surprisingly, a deep sense of pride. She had feared the worst, that his ambition would pull him away, and that she would have to let go. But instead, he had chosen them, chosen her. I know it's not a simple choice, he continued, taking her hand in his. And I don't expect things to just magically get better. We still have a long way to go, but I want to try. I want to build something real with you. And that means I need to stay here, with you, for us. Her eyes stung with tears, but she refused to let them fall. The raw emotion in his voice was enough to shatter whatever walls had remained between them. She had always been strong, always believed that she could handle everything on her own. But now she saw that she didn't have to. He was here, and he was choosing to be present, to invest in their relationship in a way that neither of them had before. You really mean it? She asked softly, her voice shaking with the intensity of the moment. He nodded, squeezing her hand gently. I do. I can't promise that it will be easy, but I'm not running anymore. I'm here, for as long as you'll have me. Amelia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to process everything. She had always feared that love would leave her empty, that she would give everything and end up alone. But now, she realized, love wasn't about perfection or certainty. It was about presence, about showing up for one another, even when things were hard, even when the future was uncertain. I'm glad you're staying, she whispered, the words barely above a breath. I don't know what the future holds either, but I know I don't want to face it without you. William's smile was small, but it was enough. Then let's figure it out together, one step at a time. The days that followed were filled with a new sense of purpose. Amelia and William didn't dive headfirst into making plans for the future, but they began to rebuild piece by piece. They worked on their communication, learning how to share their fears and hopes without judgment, without retreating into old habits. The changes weren't immediate, and there were still moments when the weight of their past threatened to pull them apart. But each day, they grew stronger. They spent more time together: quiet evenings, simple walks, cooking dinner together. They found joy in the mundane, in the small, everyday moments that had once been overshadowed by the distance between them. Amelia found herself laughing more, not just because of William's jokes, but because she could finally breathe without the constant fear of losing everything. And William, for his part, learned to let go of the control that had once defined him. He still had moments where his old habits resurfaced, where he wanted to fix everything, to make it all work in a way that felt safe. But Amelia had learned how to... I think we need to talk, he said, his voice calm, but laced with something she couldn't quite identify. Amelia turned to him, her heart skipping a beat. She had felt this coming, the tension that had been building for days, the words unsaid that now hovered between them like a cloud. She swallowed hard, steeling herself for whatever was coming next. What is it? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though she could feel the unease creeping in. I've been thinking, William began, his eyes searching hers, about us, about where we're going, and I think we need to be honest with each other, really honest. Her chest tightened, her heart racing. She knew what was coming. They had been circling this conversation for months, avoiding it with every quiet touch, every simple gesture. But now, it seemed, the moment had arrived. She could feel the weight of it, heavy in the air between them. I don't want to keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not, William continued, his voice quieter now. I know we've made progress, but I can't shake the feeling that we're still holding back. Both of us. Amelia opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She had wanted to deny it, to pretend like everything was fine, that they were exactly where they needed to be. But deep down, she knew he was right. They had been holding on to a version of their relationship that wasn't entirely real. They had been moving forward, yes, but they hadn't truly faced everything that needed to be faced. "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been feeling it too. I've been scared. I think I've been too scared to really give myself to this, to fully let go of everything I've built and trust that we can do this. I've been holding back, even though I've told myself I wasn't." William reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring, but there was still a certain hesitation in his eyes. "Amelia, I know I haven't been perfect either. I've been so focused on my work, on keeping everything in control, that I didn't always see the things that mattered. I thought I could just fix things with effort, but I see now that it's not enough. We need more than that." She squeezed his hand, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of vulnerability and understanding. They had both been operating from a place of fear of losing each other, fear of the future, and fear of what would happen if they truly allowed themselves to be all in. "I don't know what's next," Amelia admitted, her voice shaky with the raw honesty of the moment. "But I want to try. I'm not sure how to do this, how to let go of all the things that have held me back. But I want to do it with you. I want to give this everything I have, even if I'm scared." William's expression softened, and he leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against hers. "I'm scared too," he whispered. "But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it means we're finally ready to face everything together." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There were no promises made, no grand declarations. There was only the quiet understanding that they had reached a turning point, one where the past had to be acknowledged and released if they were ever going to move forward. They couldn't keep hiding from the truth, from the messiness of love and life. They had to embrace it, even if it meant walking through the unknown together. Finally, Amelia broke the silence, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "I don't have all the answers. I don't even know if I'm ready to fully let go of the fear, but I'm willing to try. For us. For me. For you." William nodded, his hand still holding hers. "I'm willing to try too." The words weren't perfect, and the road ahead wasn't clear, but in that moment, Amelia knew something important had shifted. They had both been holding on to something that wasn't serving them anymore. And now, for the first time in a long time, they were ready to let go. They were ready to face the future together, even in the face of uncertainty. As they sat there, wrapped in the warmth of their shared vulnerability, Amelia couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. It wasn't a grand, sweeping hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that comes with promises and guarantees. It was quieter, more profound. It was the hope that, even though they didn't have all the answers, they had each other. And that was enough for now. Facing the future together, the decision to confront their fears together felt like the first real step toward building something sustainable between them. But that was only the beginning. Amelia and William had cracked open the walls they had both spent so many years building, but now the work of truly healing and moving forward began. They didn't expect instant transformation, and they knew the road ahead would still be filled with moments of doubt and difficulty. But they were ready. The following weeks were filled with small but meaningful changes. William had made a commitment to slow down, to be more present in their relationship, rather than retreating into his work, as he had done so often in the past. It wasn't easy for him. The pressure of the business, the constant need to stay ahead, was deeply ingrained in him. But he was trying, and that was all Amelia had asked for. As for Amelia, she was learning to be more open, to not carry the weight of everything herself. She had always been fiercely independent, believing that if she could just prove her worth, she wouldn't need anyone. But with each passing day, she found herself realizing that she didn't have to do it alone. One quiet evening, after dinner, they sat together in their living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the space. The silence between them wasn't awkward or heavy, it was comfortable. But as they sat there, Amelia couldn't help but feel a growing sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the time they had together, for the space they had created where they could truly be themselves. "You know," William said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking. We've come a long way in such a short time, but there's still a lot we need to face, and I don't want us to rush through it, but I also don't want to keep living in the past." Amelia turned to look at him, her heart swelling with emotion at the sincerity in his voice. "I agree," she said softly. "We've made progress, but we need to keep working on ourselves, on this, on us." William nodded, his eyes dark with thought. "I've been so focused on fixing everything that I didn't realize I needed to start with myself. I've always been about controlling the outcome, but I can't do that with us. We need to be able to navigate things together without me trying to control it." She reached out, placing her hand on his. "We're learning," she said, "and that's the only thing we can do. We can't be perfect, but we can keep trying, and that's enough." The next few days were busy, filled with the usual work and responsibilities, but there was a new lightness in the air between them. Amelia noticed it most in the small moments, the way they now made time to share breakfast together before heading out for the day, the way William had begun sending her little texts during the day, just to check in, to show that he was thinking of her. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, they found themselves talking about the future in a way they never had before, without fear, without doubt. Amelia was no longer afraid to dream with him. They had both been through so much, had faced so many barriers in their relationship, that the simple act of dreaming felt like a revolutionary act. It felt freeing. "What do you think the future looks like for us?" Amelia asked, her voice tentative but filled with a quiet hope. William leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I think it looks uncertain, but that's okay. We've always tried to control everything, haven't we? I think the future looks like us figuring it out, one step at a time, together." Her heart warmed at his words. For so long, she had imagined a perfect future, one that was carefully planned and flawlessly executed. But now, she realized that the real beauty of their future lay in the messiness, the imperfection, and the willingness to face it all together. "That sounds perfect," she whispered, leaning over to rest her head on his shoulder. The next few weeks flew by. Amelia and William were navigating their new reality, learning to trust each other in ways they never had before. They weren't perfect, and they still had moments of tension and uncertainty, but they were learning how to communicate, how to truly hear each other. They were no longer hiding from the things that had once kept them apart. Instead, they were facing them head-on, hand in hand. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat down for dinner. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and teasing, but as the evening wore on, the conversation shifted to something more serious. "I've been thinking about the future," William began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "About what comes next for us. I know I've been focused on my work and the business, but I've realized something." Amelia looked at him, sensing the weight of his words. "What is it?" "I want more," he said simply. "I want more of this, more of us. I've been thinking about making a real commitment, not just in words, but in actions." Amelia felt her pulse quicken as she waited for him to continue. She had heard the words commitment before, but this time there was something different in his tone. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. "I want to build something that lasts, something real," he continued, "and I know I can't do it alone. I want to do it with you. I don't want to keep living this half-life. I want us to have a future, a real one." For a moment, Amelia couldn't speak. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, not wanting to break the moment. She had always dreamed of this, of someone truly choosing her, of someone wanting a future with her. And now, William was offering that to her, with no caveats, no reservations, just the promise of being present, of building something together. "I want that too," she said, her voice shaky but full of conviction. "I want to build a life with you, a real one. No more pretending, no more hiding, just us, together." The following months were marked by a new sense of growth and possibility. William and Amelia were no longer just existing side by side. They were truly building something slowly, but with intention. They made decisions together, talked about their dreams, their hopes, and their fears. They learned how to support each other through the inevitable challenges that came their way, always remembering that they were stronger together. As they sat together on the balcony one evening, watching the city lights twinkle below them, Amelia couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. They weren't perfect, nothing in life was, but they were real, and that was enough. "I think we're finally doing it," William said, breaking the silence. "Building something real." Amelia smiled, her heart full. "I think we are." And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. She had stopped searching for perfection, for a love that fit some idealistic mold. What she had with William was real, messy, imperfect, but it was theirs, and it was enough. Unforeseen tests. The months that followed were filled with growth, not just as individuals, but as partners. Amelia and William had learned to navigate the complexities of their relationship, each day bringing new opportunities to build on the foundation they were creating. Their love, while imperfect, had become something real, a bond that wasn't based on grand gestures, but on the quiet consistency of showing up for one another day after day. But life, as it often does, had a way of throwing challenges at them, just when they thought they had found a rhythm. The first test came unexpectedly, like a storm brewing on the horizon that neither of them had seen coming. It was a Friday afternoon when the phone call came. Amelia was in the middle of a meeting, focused on her client's case, when her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it briefly, recognizing the number. It was William. Her stomach tightened, the sense of unease that had been lurking for weeks suddenly creeping into her chest. She excused herself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway, quickly answering the call. "Amelia," William's voice came through, tight and strained. "I need to talk to you. Something's happened." Her heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's the business," he said, his voice dropping lower. "The deal I turned down, the one I thought would fall through. Well, it didn't. They've offered me an even bigger opportunity, a chance to take the company global. It's huge, but there's a catch." Amelia's stomach twisted as she listened. The last thing she wanted was for William to be pulled back into the world that had kept them apart for so long. The world of ambition and control, of chasing dreams that came at a personal cost. She had hoped that they were past this, that their relationship would be the priority. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "I have to move to London. They want me there to oversee everything," William continued. "It's a huge opportunity for me for the business, but I don't know what to do, Amelia. I can't ask you to uproot your life again, but at the same time, this could change everything." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. She had feared this moment, knowing that his career would always be a part of their relationship, that it would eventually test their commitment to each other, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. "I need to think about this," William said after a pause. "Can we talk tonight? I'll be home by 8. "Of course," she replied, though her mind was racing. She hung up the phone, feeling a sinking sense of dread in her stomach. She had just begun to feel like they were building a life together, and now this new challenge threatened to tear them apart again. The thought of William leaving, of them being separated by distance once more, felt like a cruel echo of the past. "I want to build something that lasts, something real," he continued. "And I know I can't do it alone. I want to do it with you. I don't want to keep living this half-life. I want us to have a future, a real one." For a moment, Amelia couldn't speak. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, not wanting to break the moment. She had always dreamed of this, of someone truly choosing her, of someone wanting a future with her. And now, William was offering that to her, with no caveats, no reservations, just the promise of being present, of building something together. "I want that too," she said, her voice shaky but full of conviction. "I want to build a life with you, a real one. No more pretending, no more hiding, just us, together." The following months were marked by a new sense of growth and possibility. William and Amelia were no longer just existing side by side. They were truly building something slowly, but with intention. They made decisions together, talked about their dreams, their hopes, and their fears. They learned how to support each other through the inevitable challenges that came their way, always remembering that they were stronger together. As they sat together on the balcony one evening, watching the city lights twinkle below them, Amelia couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. They weren't perfect, nothing in life was, but they were real, and that was enough. "I think we're finally doing it," William said, breaking the silence. "Building something real." Amelia smiled, her heart full. "I think we are." And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. She had stopped searching for perfection, for a love that fit some idealistic mold. What she had with William was real, messy, imperfect, but it was theirs, and it was enough. Unforeseen tests. The months that followed were filled with growth, not just as individuals, but as partners. Amelia and William had learned to navigate the complexities of their relationship, each day bringing new opportunities to build on the foundation they were creating. Their love, while imperfect, had become something real, a bond that wasn't based on grand gestures, but on the quiet consistency of showing up for one another day after day. But life, as it often does, had a way of throwing challenges at them just when they thought they had found a rhythm. The first test came unexpectedly, like a storm brewing on the horizon that neither of them had seen coming. It was a Friday afternoon when the phone call came. Amelia was in the middle of a meeting, focused on her client's case, when her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it briefly, recognizing the number. It was William. Her stomach tightened, the sense of unease that had been lurking for weeks suddenly creeping into her chest. She excused herself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway, quickly answering the call. "Amelia," William's voice came through, tight and strained. "I need to talk to you. Something's happened." Her heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's the business," he said, his voice dropping lower. "The deal I turned down, the one I thought would fall through? Well, it didn't. They've offered me an even bigger opportunity, a chance to take the company global. It's huge, but there's a catch." Amelia's stomach twisted as she listened. The last thing she wanted was for William to be pulled back into the world that had kept them apart for so long. The world of ambition and control, of chasing dreams that came at a personal cost. She had hoped that they were past this, that their relationship would be the priority. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "I have to move to London. They want me there to oversee everything," William continued. "It's a huge opportunity for me, for the business. But I don't know what to do, Amelia. I can't ask you to uproot your life again, but at the same time, this could change everything." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. She had feared this moment, knowing that his career would always be a part of their relationship, that it would eventually test their commitment to each other. But she hadn't expected it to come so soon. "I need to think about this," William said after a pause. "Can we talk tonight? I'll be home by 8. "Of course," she replied, though her mind was racing. She hung up the phone, feeling a sinking sense of dread in her stomach. She had just begun to feel like they were building a life together, and now this new challenge threatened to tear them apart again. The thought of William leaving, of them being separated by distance once more, felt like a cruel echo of the past. That evening, when William returned home, the air between them was thick with unspoken tension. They sat down at the dining table, neither of them touching their food. Amelia could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between his ambition and his desire to stay with her. "I don't want to leave you," he said quietly, his voice cracking slightly. "But I don't know if I can let this opportunity go. It's everything I've worked for. I'm torn, Amelia. I don't want to drag you into something you don't want, but I also don't know how to walk away from this." Amelia felt a wave of emotion crash over her, a mix of fear, frustration, and a deep, aching love for him. She had always known that William's career was a part of him, that it would always be a force in their relationship, but she had hoped that the choices they made would be ones that considered both of their futures, not just his. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm scared, William. I'm scared that we've just started to build something, and now this opportunity comes up, and I can't help but wonder if you go, will we be able to survive? Will we be able to stay together? Or will we just keep falling apart?" William's face softened, and he reached out, taking her hand in his. I don't want to lose you, Amelia. I can't keep doing this, chasing something that doesn't matter if I don't have you. But this opportunity, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It could change everything for us, for our future, and I just don't know what the right choice is anymore. Amelia closed her eyes, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She wanted to support him, to stand by him no matter what. But she also didn't want to lose herself in the process, to give up everything she had built for him, for his dreams. She had spent so much of her life trying to make sure she didn't lose herself in the relationships she had with others. And now, she felt like she was standing at the edge of losing herself once more. I wish I had an answer for you, she said, her voice quiet. But I don't know what the right choice is. I don't know if I can keep living in this uncertainty. We've worked so hard to get here, William, and now this. It feels like everything is on the line again, and I can't keep feeling like I'm second place to your career. There was a long silence between them, both of them lost in their own thoughts, their own fears. The weight of the decision hung in the air, thick and oppressive. Finally, William spoke, his voice raw with emotion. I don't want to make this choice alone, Amelia, but I need to know what you want too. Do you want this, with me? Do you want a future together, even if it's hard? I can't make that decision without you. Amelia looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She knew that whatever decision she made now would have consequences. If she pushed him away, if she told him to go, would she regret it? If she stayed, would it mean sacrificing everything she had built for the sake of their relationship? I want us, she said softly, her voice filled with determination. I want to build something real with you, but I don't know if I can do it at the expense of my own happiness. I don't want to lose myself again. I don't want to feel like I'm constantly waiting for you to come back. The words hung in the air between them, a final, painful truth. She wasn't ready to give him an answer yet, but she knew that whatever happened next, they would have to make this decision together. They could no longer let their careers and ambitions dictate the future of their relationship. They would have to choose what truly mattered together. And for the first time, Amelia realized that the hardest part of all wasn't facing the uncertainty of their future. It was facing the truth about what they both truly needed, and whether or not they could find a way to make it work. The choice. The days following their conversation felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on Amelia. Every moment was filled with the uncertainty of what would come next, and her heart felt torn in two. William's words echoed in her mind. Do you want this? Do you want a future with me, even if it's hard? How could she answer that without risking everything? She knew that what William was offering her wasn't just a chance to build a life together. It was a choice between two worlds. One world, the one she had built for herself, the one she knew, was stable, secure. The other, the one William was offering, was uncertain, risky, but filled with the promise of shared dreams, of being with him, truly and completely. As the days wore on, Amelia's mind kept returning to their conversation. She couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to have both, to hold on to the life she had built, to follow her own dreams, while still being with William. But deep down, she knew that wasn't possible. Life wasn't a balance between competing desires, it was about choosing a path and committing to it fully. And she had to choose.
William's business offer was too big, too life-changing to ignore. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about their future. His decision wasn't just about career, it was about their relationship, about him choosing to be fully present in their shared life, despite the sacrifices it would demand. But it would demand sacrifices from her too. The idea of uprooting her life, of leaving behind the comfort of the career she had worked so hard to build, left her feeling vulnerable. Amelia had always been fiercely independent, building a career that didn't need anyone's validation. It was her escape, her safe place. But now, it was all being called into question. What was she willing to give up for the man she loved? The morning William left for his business trip, everything felt heavier than usual. Amelia had spent the night thinking, weighing the pros and cons of every option. They hadn't spoken much before he left, both of them exhausted by the weight of the conversation that still hung in the air between them. She hadn't made a decision. She didn't know if she could. As William kissed her goodbye, there was an unspoken tension between them. It wasn't anger or resentment. It was the weight of the unknown. "I'll be back in a few days," he said, brushing his hand against her cheek, his touch tender. "We'll talk when I get home." Amelia nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation they needed to have had already started. There was no going back from it. He had made his choice, but she still wasn't sure about hers. For the next few days, Amelia kept herself busy, focusing on work, the cases she needed to prepare, the deadlines she had to meet. But in the quiet moments, when the world slowed down and the weight of the decision sat heavily on her chest, she couldn't help but feel the pull of the future she could have with William. A future where they faced everything together, even the difficult choices. But at what cost? She went to the gym to try to clear her mind, running on the treadmill until she was too exhausted to think. She ran until her legs ached, until the confusion and doubt melted into the rhythm of her footsteps. But as she stepped off the machine and wiped her face with a towel, the decision was still there, waiting for her, staring her in the face. That evening, as the sun set over the city, casting a soft orange glow through her apartment window, Amelia found herself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. She had thought about calling William, but the truth was, she already knew what he would say. He wanted to go. He had made that clear, and he was asking her to follow him, to take the leap. But could she do it? When William finally returned, they were both quiet. The tension that had been building between them for days finally came to a head as he walked through the door, his tired eyes locking onto hers. He looked like a man who had spent the entire flight thinking, and now it was time for them to finally have the conversation they had been avoiding. Amelia stood up, her heart racing. She had thought about this moment so many times over the past few days, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure how to begin. "I've been thinking a lot, William," she started, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "About everything. About us." He nodded, taking a step toward her. "I've been thinking about it too." She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't know what to do. You've made your decision, and I can see how much this opportunity means to you. I don't want to hold you back, but I don't know if I'm ready to leave everything behind. I've worked so hard to get here, to build a life that's mine. I don't know if I'm ready to walk away from it." William stepped closer, his expression softening. "Amelia, I never wanted you to feel like you had to walk away from your dreams. You're not just a part of my life, you are my life. I don't want to be the one who pulls you away from what you've worked for, but I also want to be the one who walks beside you. And I know that this decision isn't just about me, it's about us." She looked at him, her heart aching. "I want to be with you, William. I want to build something real with you, but I also need to know that I'm not losing myself in the process. I can't do this if I'm not whole." "I get it," he said, his voice soft and full of understanding. "And I'm not asking you to lose yourself. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust that we can find a way to make this work. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but we have to try. Together." Amelia closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words settle into her chest. She had always been the one who needed control, who needed to have everything figured out. But now, she realized, she didn't have to have all the answers. She just had to take a leap of faith. "I don't have all the answers," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "But I want to try. I want to be with you. And I want to build a life together. Not just your life or mine, but ours." William stepped forward, taking her hands in his. "Then let's do this. Let's build a life together, the right way, one step at a time." And in that moment, Amelia knew that the decision had been made not just by one of them, but by both of them. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time it didn't seem so daunting. They would face it together. No more holding back, no more fear, just the promise of a new beginning, side by side. Life doesn't always follow a clear path, and sometimes we have to face difficult decisions and challenges with no easy answers. One of the key lessons in this story is the choice between personal goals and love, between ambition and connection. Sometimes we have to trade our ego, our personal dreams, to build a genuine and lasting relationship. This doesn't mean giving up ourselves, but learning how to find balance between personal goals and emotional bonds. The truth is, happiness isn't about perfection. It's about accepting the struggles and imperfect moments as part of building a relationship. And when you learn to love yourself and your partner genuinely, without fear, things will gradually become clearer. Trust yourself and those around you because sometimes love is a choice you make every day, not just a sudden action. And so, the story comes to an end, but the journey doesn't really stop here. The path we walk in life, especially when it's filled with love and ambition, is never straightforward. Sometimes it feels like you're caught between two worlds, two desires, unsure of which way to turn. But remember, it's not about having all the answers or choosing the perfect way. It's about moving forward, one step at a time, with the hope that you'll get closer to what truly matters. As we reach the end of today's story, I want to remind you, you don't need to have it all figured out. You are enough, just as you are. Keep going, keep dreaming, and know that every step counts. If you've enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Stories TH. And hey, leave a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It'd be great to hear from you. Take care of yourself, stay kind, and remember, life's journey is meant to be experienced, not rushed.